Aloha, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Triple F podcast, Faith and Family First, where my co host Jim Hochberg and I are going to talk about the challenges in more than 30 states, citing Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which holds that nobody should hold office if they, quote, engage in insurrection, end quote, or have, quote, given aid or comfort, quote, to insurrectionists. Right here in Hawaii, we have a bill. So let's chat about that. I know I'm moving. Wait, is that what you're going to say? I'm moving.
No. What I'm going to say is Carl Rhodes is an absolute imbecile.
Okay, you can say that all you want to.
I just did. Carl, call me.
You can say that all you want to, but the bill that we're talking about right now, which Hawaii Family Farm has not weighed in on, so this is just an educational piece to let people know that it's moving. It passed third reading already in the Senate, and there were 14 straight yeses. There were 3 yeses with reservations, and that was Senators Aquino, Dela Cruz, and Moriwaki. And then there were 5 noes, Senators Ava, Tecoit, Gabbard, Kim, and Wakai all voted no. And there were 3 senators excused, Favela, Hashimoto, and McKelvey. So this bill that we're going to talk about, it passed the Senate already. It has now crossed over into the House. And the bill we're talking about is Senate Bill 2392, and there's a Senate Draft 1. And basically, it is to specify that the ballots of the chief, there's a lot of reasons for the bill, but really the most easiest way to describe it is they want to get Trump off of the ballot.
Because they want to protect democracy.
They do. They do want to protect democracy.
Which is really funny, because if they take people off the ballot, you can't vote for them anymore, which is kind of the basis of democratic government, is you pick your own leaders.
I am curious to why. I don't understand why our state always does this. There are lawsuits across the country already, right?
Yeah.
People questioning this. And
it's not only are there lawsuits, the Supreme Court of the United States already heard oral argument on the Colorado Supreme Court,
right? That was the
ruling that it was okay for the Secretary of State in Colorado unilaterally, without a conviction under the 14th Amendment, to take Trump off the ballot. They've already had oral argument. I happen to have listened to it. It was on TV without visual. It was very, very interesting. Newsmax had it, Fox had it, and you could hear the questions and the answers, and there are huge legal issues in the whole can a state do this? So our legislation says if you want to challenge somebody under the 14th Amendment or under the Hawaii Constitution, disqualification from public office.
Do you want to remind people what the 14th Amendment is in case they don't have their little pocket constitution?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. The United States of America was founded based on the Declaration of Independence in the 1700s. It was July 4th, 1776. And the founding fathers told the King of England, when the monarchy in England, which was the owner, so to speak, of the English colonies in the United States, exercises political power of monarchy in such a way that the colonists under his oppression choose to separate themselves politically and form their own government, that God gives you the right to do that. The Civil War happened, where some people would argue the South wanted to separate. They seceded because their economy needed the slavery labor thing.
Okay, and like
hang on.
no, wait.
And so Abraham Lincoln said, "Oh no, you don't." And then they said, "Watch us at Fort Sumter," and that started a big fight.
Well, no,
and then the big fight ended up at Appomattox with Abraham Lincoln crushing the South's effort to secede. And we became the United States of America in all of its glory again. Hang on, you asked.
No, wait. No, I want you to go there. I just want to make the one.
I'm going to tell you about the 14th Amendment.
I know, but I just want to make the comment about, because you talked about succeeded. I just want to make the comment for those that are hoping that California will succeed from the United States.
Succeed.
Yes, that thing. That they will do that. See, you do this to me, and then I can't say the word. Okay. And now I'm not going to be able to say the word for the. But you know what I mean. People are hoping that California will go with.
So you asked me, what is the 14th Amendment?
So continue.
So because Abe won the war, and the Southern Army lost the war, and slavery was abolished, they had to figure out how to change the Constitution, because the Constitution as adopted in 1789 actually counted slaves in the apportionment of congressional seats as 4/5 of a person. They weren't 5/5, not a whole person, they were 4/5. Slavery existed as a concept in the Constitution. So they had to amend the Constitution to fix the repeal of slavery and the freedom of the slaves. And so the 13th and 14th Amendments were amendments to the United States Constitution to set the ship of America straight after the Civil War. And so the 14th Amendment is the due process clause where we got Roe v. Wade out of the 14th Amendment due process clause. Abortion is a constitutional right under the 14th Amendment. And we've talked about the penumbra and the rays and all this stuff. But it also has Section 3, because they also had to deal with, since the Southern leadership politically was vanquished, but the voters were put back into the voting population for the United States, are we going to let them elect people that we're going to want to overthrow the government, right? So the 14th Amendment, Section 3, basically says no person shall be a senator or a representative in Congress or a member of the Electoral College for president or vice president voting, or hold any office, civil or military, under the U.S. or any state, who, having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress or as an officer of the United States or a member of a state legislature or an executive or judicial officer of a state, their oath to support the Constitution of the U.S., and if they engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the United States or given aid or comfort to the enemies of the U.S., they cannot, by this Section 3, hold an office. So Colorado and Maine and all these states decided that a speech that President Trump gave January 6th on the big area that runs from the White House past the Washington Memorial and down to Congress, whatever, where he told people to go peacefully and let your voices be heard at Congress on the day that they were counting the electoral votes to see whether he or Biden won. That was insurrection. And that's what they're saying.
And that's the question. So like regular people are asking that question. Has Trump ever been found guilty in a court of law of insurrection?
So there's actually a better, more foundational question than that. Has Trump ever been charged with having committed insurrection?
Okay,
because
so you have to
get
be, you can't
until
you've been charged. Okay,
and the answer is no.
Okay, so if he's never been charged and he has never been found guilty, how are all these cases able to move forward?
Because secretaries of states, we don't have a secretary of state in Hawaii. we have the Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs. It does the business stuff. We've got the election office. It does the election stuff.
We have a Senate, though, that likes to write bills.
But these secretaries of state in these various states have unilaterally, that means all by themselves, between their own two ears, made a decision that President Trump committed insurrection on January 6th, and therefore, under Article 3 of the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, they can't be on the ballot. And that got challenged from Colorado. The U.S. Supreme Court accepted the case, and they're going to rule really soon, probably before Senate Bill 2392 even gets passed.
Do you remember you and I having this discussion when the legislature was going to pass that bill forcing pregnancy centers to post signs? Do you not remember us talking with the legislator saying, wait until the decision comes down, right? The California case was happening, right? And we were just waiting for that. I don't know why. And even like on the last show, we talked about marijuana, right? A lot of our legislators think that we're headed down this road anyway, so let's just do it. And that seems to be the same case here. There are other states that are trying to get him off the ballot, so let's join.
But Carl Rhodes should have turned the page in the U.S. Constitution's 14th Amendment to Section 5, which is 3, 4, 5. It's really close.
You mean it follows in order?
This is what the 14th Amendment also says. The Congress, you'll recognize this phrasing from 1998. The Congress shall have power to enforce by appropriate legislation the provisions of the 14th Amendment. They haven't done it. So one of the big legal arguments at the U.S. Supreme Court on the Colorado attempt to use the insurrection clause of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment to keep Trump off the ballot is going to be, well, Congress hasn't spelled out what the procedure is by legislation, so Trump cannot be charged because there's no process. He can't defend himself, which he hasn't been able to do. The Secretary of State proclaimed, like King George, the monarch of England, used to proclaim when the founding fathers said, we're tired of this, we're out of here. So that's one of the questions that the U.S. Supreme Court may address when they solve this problem. Congress hasn't yet set up the procedure under Section 5, Senator Rhodes. Just go 2 sections further in.
So who would have to bring up the charge? So if they wanted to do it the right way.
They can't do it the right way because Congress hasn't given them the right way.
Well, no, but I mean, you said that in order for Trump to be found guilty of insurrection, he has to be charged. So who would have to make that charge against him?
Okay, so that's kind of interesting. Let's look at the case of Dennis versus United States that the U.S. Supreme Court decided on June 4th, 1951. There was actually, a statute in the United States federal system called the Smith Act. And the Smith Act made it unlawful, but this is back in the Second World War, and when the communists were first going to war to take over countries, right?
Right.
And Sections 2 and 3 of the Smith Act said that it would be unlawful for any person to knowingly or willfully advocate, abet, advise, or teach. That's all First Amendment stuff. This case had to do with whether making that a crime violated the First Amendment. But listen to this. To knowingly or willfully advocate, abet, advise, or teach the duty, the necessity, the desirability, or propriety of overthrowing or destroying any government in the United States by force or violence, or by the assassination of any officer of such government, or to organize or to help organize any society, group, or assembly of persons who teach, advocate, or encourage the overthrow or destruction of the government in the United States by force or violence, or to be or become a member of, affiliate with any such group. So, the Smith Act was a law when our constitutional jurisprudence was very different from what it is today. That's the first thing we have to realize. So the people that were in charge of the Communist Party of the United States were charged under the Smith Act for seeking to overthrow or destroy the government by force or violence, because that was the purpose of the Communist Party of the United States. And they were convicted, and the Court of Appeals said that the evidence was sufficient. And the Supreme Court of the United States said, you can't really do this based on this evidence. You've got to have really strong evidence that they're actually getting really close to doing it, not just that it's written in their charter, basically. So the test that the U.S. Supreme Court used came from Schenck v. the U.S., which was in the First World War era, 1919, where Justice Holmes stated, and this is a quote, "The question in every case is whether the words used are used in such circumstances and are of such nature as to create a clear and present danger that they will bring about the substantive evil that Congress has a right to prevent." So when you look at the use of the 14th Amendment and the speech that Trump gave on January 6th, somebody's going to have to charge him under this clear and present danger, but they can't charge him because there's no statute to charge him under.
Okay, so I know that you absolutely hate it when one assumes anything. I know that you do. But assuming that nobody has brought up these charges against Trump, does that mean that it's because people know that there's no way he'd be found guilty?
Well, if they want to convict him of violating the 14th Amendment and thereby being ineligible to run for president, and there's another huge legal issue is whether or not that Section 3 of the 14th Amendment applies to the president or the vice president. Because if you remember what I said, it says
you read through
a
all
senator or a representative in Congress or an elector for those offices of president, vice president, or a military officer or blah, blah. Why did they leave out president and vice president? It may not even apply to them. That's the second big point.
The talking heads that
There's
I
another
listen
third
to.
big point, which is, how can a state in state court enforce the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution? They don't have jurisdiction. So what I'm saying is Carl Rhodes is stupider than stupid, because he has to rush out there and get his little political stuff together for his benefit politically. It's a waste of freaking time.
Okay, so let's walk this through.
Am I mad? Nah.
Well, that's why I decided that we should talk about this, because there are a lot of people, especially the Republican Party. I mean, when you looked at, I don't know if you had a chance to look at it, but I looked at that 300 people testified against it. 10 testified for it, plus the parties that like it, and they went ahead and passed it anyway. Right. So there's a lot of people here that are very upset about it. But let's just walk this through. Let's pretend in a perfect world that they've done everything correct. Right.
Okay. So in a perfect world, he would have looked not at the 14th Amendment, but it's Section 3 of the state constitution. Let me tell you what our own state constitution says. I'm feeling like Mark Levin. Anyway, Section 3, disqualifications from public office or employment in the state constitution. No person shall hold any public office or employment who has been convicted of any act to overthrow or attempt to overthrow or conspiracy with any person to overthrow the government of this state or of the United States by force or violence. So this is the legislature in the state of Hawaii wanting to get on the bandwagon with Colorado And they're going to get knocked off the bandwagon by the Supreme Court, maybe even before this show airs.
And that's now that you've had your little moment on the soapbox, come off the soapbox for a minute, because that was the point I was trying to make. Let's walk this through. Maybe I should have said in their perfect world and not in the perfect world.
Well, see, they can't see, so their perfect world is utter blindness.
Their perfect world. This bill sails through the House. It passes the House and becomes law. All right. Let's walk through two case scenarios. The first case scenario, what happens if the Supreme Court doesn't rule by the time the election rolls around? Then
they are going to rule. In fact, I talked to Jim Bopp today about this. Remember him?
Yes,
He was the lawyer for the GOP nationally in the 2012 election cycle. He's the guy that I did the case here to allow C4s and super PACs to have the freedom under the Constitution that Citizens United gave nationally. So he's my go-to guy on election stuff. He said to me, he's pretty sure they're going to rule on this quickly because of this problem popping up in all kinds of dumb places like Hawaii.
Okay, so assuming then that he's correct and the Supreme Court rules, what happens to all of these legislation?
That's why I'm saying they're wasting their time. Even when I sued to have the Bruin case Second Amendment rights apply in Hawaii in 2018, because the New York Second Amendment case, concealed carry, was headed to the U.S. Supreme Court, my federal judge in the Hawaii District Court said in 2018, let's wait and see what the Supreme Court says, because there's no reason to do all this work. They're going to answer the question for us. It was the same thing with the pregnancy center case when Carl Rhodes and his friends went ahead and passed that pregnancy center bill and we sued. Our federal judge said, let's wait for the Becerra case in California. The Ninth Circuit's ruled it's heading up to the U.S. Supreme Court. Let's wait. Let's not work on things that we don't have to waste our time on, because there are other problems to spend the working time fixing.
And I have to be honest, this is kind of the advice I've given a couple people that really wanted to get up in arms about this bill. I'm like, let them dig their grave.
No, I think we should go down there and say, you should be working on homelessness instead of this. That's in my neighborhood.
Well, I think most people do that when they participate. They bring up these other important issues that there are families in Lahaina that are begging for stuff to be done so that they can be taken care of. So there's always other pressing issues that they could focus on. But I'm just smiling to myself, because if it's true, all of this stuff, and if we truly believe that the Supreme Court's going to rule, then let them dig their own grave. And hopefully, Jim, I'm going to give you I know already where you're going to go with this, and I will give you permission to go on there. This is why when the elections rolls around, what?
Well,
what are you going to say? What do you always say? When elections roll around, we have a responsibility.
All of you who voted for Carl Rhodes, this is your fault. This is your fault. You got to stop.
You can pick on Carl Rhodes, but we have to use that same way of looking at
the judiciary chairman in the Senate. He could have been a statesman of the highest regard if he said, I'm not going to hear this bill because, number one, the Supreme Court's going to answer this, and I need to take this hour in this hearing to deal with homelessness. Or he even could have said, Hawaii is not going to vote for Trump. We don't need to take him off the ballot.
Well, he's not going to take that position because he introduced the bill. His name is on it, so he wouldn't do that. But okay, but even if I follow your line of thought there, anybody sitting on the Senate Judiciary Committee could have said, I'm voting no on this because.
Absolutely.
So again, we can pick on one particular legislature, but when you look at the legislature as a whole, this is where and why we need to be plugged into what's happening. And don't even say I'm moving, because for those of us that are living here for the rest of our lives and will die here and be buried here, we have to be concerned about our legislature. Every time I do training on faithful citizenship, and you've participated in some of these, we always remind people that elections are the report card. It's the report card time.
Or it's the job application.
Well,
and we can't just vote for him because people vote for him. We got to ask, do we want this person in this job?
Yeah,
and
well,
we don't ask
well,
that.
you have two choices, right? If your legislator is someone who's been in office, it's a report card. And you need to say, did they do a good job? Are they speaking for me? Is this the person that is bringing the very best into the state house or the state senate? And you vote yes or no. So stop looking at it whether this person's a Democrat or whether this
Correct.
person's a Republican. Are they providing the very best service to the state of Hawaii?
But here's the
now,
other
if they're
problem
a new
with this
person,
bill. Let me just say the one thing that really bothers me.
okay.
Everybody that's in favor of keeping Trump off the ballot, they want to preserve democracy. But do you know what democracy is? Voting for your elected representatives. So if they're going to decide who people get to vote for, that's totalitarianism, and we can't turn a blind eye to this.
Jim, this is where we're at, though. I mean, when you look at everything that's happening in the nation today, it has become where the court of public opinion has decided a lot of things. And I fear for our country. And why do I fear for our country? Because no matter who wins the election, no matter who it is, whether Joe Biden gets reelected into office or whether Trump is the nominee and he becomes the elected, there is going to be so much turmoil in our country. Nobody is going to be totally happy. You're going to have people that are going to be upset, whoever gets into that office. And we're going to have 4 years. I guarantee you, no matter who wins, we're going to have 4 years of pandemonium. Because if Biden is reelected, then all the Republicans are going to continue all of their angst against him and all the stuff he's not doing right. And you're going to have all of these clips of Biden falling and not being able to get up or whatever, because that's what people are going to do. And if Trump gets elected, then it's the same thing is going to happen on the other side. There's going to be lawsuits. It's going to be crazy. I wish we could just have somebody be elected that is a woman or a man of great integrity. I will never run for public office, ever. You have to be called. And we've talked about that. People people shouldn't run for office just because they want to be boss. Because we see what happens. Mm-hmm. This right here is what happens when somebody gets into office that cares more about their greatness and what they can do than someone who is truly trying to serve the people of Hawaii. Because legislators, I know some legislators who don't agree with us on the issues that still believe we have a right to come out and speak. And there are those that think we should shut up and go away. So I'm just saying that we can get frustrated all we want to. We can choose to do nothing. And a great pastor once said that Christians that stick their head in the sand pose a very tempting target to the devil.
And let me give my friend here some cover. We do not discuss before we do these shows what we're going to say. She has no idea what I'm going to say. I think I surprised her with my Mark Levin review of Senator Rhodes, so don't pick on her.
And yes, and for anybody who's taping this or they're going to write in or whatever, Hawaii Family Farm has not weighed in on this bill. We're a 501c3 organization. We do not support candidates or political parties or oppose candidates or political parties. So I am not saying one way or another who to vote for. I'm saying be responsible. I'm saying to know what your legislator, what bills they're introducing. You need to know that. You need to know what they're fighting for. You need to know if they're standing for you or if they're standing against you. And if they're standing against you, then maybe you need to vote for them to move out of the way, right? Because that's your choice in the ballot box. So
all the time that gets wasted on this particular bill that's totally unnecessary, because the Supreme Court is going to provide an answer. And I'm pretty sure the Supreme Court's going to say a state has no power to keep somebody off the ballot for president or vice president. All of the time wasted on this bill in both houses is time that couldn't help us solve the homeless problem.
Absolutely. We want to continue to encourage you to stay plugged in. Visit hawaiifamilyforum.org if you want to know what's happening at the legislature, and we give you the tools that you need to plug in. Make sure that you like this video, that you share this video, that you subscribe to the channel. See, now I can't even say that word either. I can't even say that other word. If you want to succeed from the nation, if you want to succeed in being a good Christian, then make sure that you're raising your voice. and staying plugged in as much as you can. And don't forget to hit that notification button so you know every time we upload a new video. And we will see you next week. Mahalo, everybody.
Aloha.